So, Reed Davenport is a disabled filmmaker who makes films about disability through a political lens, which is something that's very rare in representation of disability. Disability is still covered with very little political analysis, often sort of as a human interest story or sort of as inspirational kind of plot point. It's really not something that we can speak about with real political analysis very clearly, but Reed does, and that's what frames his body of work. And so, I had seen his first film, which was called "I Didn't See You There," and it's a fantastic exploration of the daily ableism Reed navigated, uh, navigating his life in Oakland, in California, as a wheelchair user. And it was an incredibly artistic film. It was very kinetic. And this, with the second project that he brought to my team at Multitude Films, was a very different kind of project stylistically, but his point of view and perspective was so not only clear and fresh, but it really challenged me personally. As someone, as a progressive person with leftist politics who cares about bodily autonomy, I thought I knew what the issue of assisted dying was all about. I sort of hadn't thought about it too much before, but I thought I knew that I was for it. It was something that I would support. But I very quickly realized how layered it is, especially when you see it through the lens of disability. And when you look at what true autonomy really looks like and the ways it's limited by how our society is shaped by things like ableism as well as racism and capitalism. It really narrows what choices are available to people. And so the film, is on the surface, it's about assisted dying, and the debate about that issue, but much deeper, it's about how we think about and devalue disability in our society, and really tie value to people's lives based on their productivity or their perceived closeness to normality. And it's really unpacking those deep-seated fears of disability.
Now, the film highlights how systemic failures can make death seem like the only option for some disabled people. What was the biggest misconception you encountered while developing this project?
Yeah, I think I learned a lot while making this project, by while doing deep research and interviewing people and investigating, particularly what is happening in Canada, where there's the most liberal assisted dying legislation nearly in the world, and disabled people can access assisted dying simply because they are disabled, whereas in many other places, including the U.S. and in the states where it is legal, it's on the basis of terminal illness, and that's a safeguard that is in place. But one of the biggest misconceptions I that we learned about is that even with the safeguard of limiting assisted dying to people who are terminally ill or have a prognosis of 6 months, um, there's a way in which um, the line between disability and being terminally ill is really fluid. When people are denied access to healthcare, disabled people can become terminally ill. There are ways that this is not so clear cut. And um, in addition, this kind of legislation never gets safer or more narrow or uh, more difficult to access. It only moves in the trend of getting faster, looser, and cheaper. And so that's a really big red flag that I discovered as well.
Now, as a producer, how did you navigate balancing the intimate personal narratives with the broader policy and ethical questions the film raises?
Yeah, so it's a film that has a journalistic and investigative approach, but there's also a personal storyline. Reed appears on camera as the narrator of the film, and as do I actually. So we're sort of a filmmaking team that you see on screen. But Reed really didn't want to make a personal film. He had just done that with his first film, and so he was hesitant to put himself on screen in a more personal way, and to give audiences access to his personal life. And but we had to walk that line a little bit because he was on screen and people did. Um, in feedback screenings or as we were pitching the film, people really wanted to know more about Reed's particular connection to the story. And so we walked a fine balance that really, said Reed doesn't owe anyone anything about, any kind of particular vulnerability on screen or access to his personal life. But what the significance of him as a narrator and sort of like driver of the experience of the film can offer audiences is a look into the very high emotional stakes that disabled people face every day about what it means to know that society devalues your life so much that they would prefer to make death more accessible to you than the means to live and thrive. And so that's the line we kind of walked in the film is when Reed was on screen, what can he offer an audience to keep them grounded and to help them understand what's a complicated perspective that the film unfolds.
Sundance audiences responded powerfully to the film. Did that reaction, for you as a producer, did that reaction reveal anything new to you about how people engage with this topic?
Yeah, we had no idea how our Sundance premiere would go. We were really nervous for it. We didn't know what the reception would be. We expected to get some really hard questions and perhaps some negative feedback about the film. But actually, it was a huge relief to experience a really affirming reception to the film. People came up and said, "Wow, this film really did change my mind on something," which is really rare these days. Like people don't change their minds a lot these days, and it was something that we're really grateful for because that's what we set out to do is to push particularly progressive people who think they know where they stand on this issue and complicate it for them and invigorate them, motivate them to really double down or commit if they haven't committed before to fighting for disability justice and to learning about how the role ableism plays in their own lives and for others.
What conversations or policy shifts do you hope this film sparks as it reaches a wider broadcast audience?
Yeah, well, we've launched this film this year in the face of really dangerous rhetoric from our political leaders that devalues disabled lives. Against the backdrop of policy changes that have stripped Medicaid, have cut lifelines like SNAP benefits and other vital social supports that people depend upon to live. And so the stakes are higher than ever for disability justice and for disabled lives. And so connecting the dots between um, against this sort of like larger eugenic rhetoric and how it plays out when you strip away the things that people need to live and are simultaneously broadening access to something like assisted dying. It represents a total divestment from human flourishing, and that's something we really want to galvanize people to commit to.
You have produced politically engaged nonfiction work. So, how did this project kind of push or evolve your approach to impact-driven storytelling?
Hmm. Um, This project pushed me in a lot of ways. I think it pushed me to think about, I mean, so I work for a production company called Multitude Films, which thinks about making films that movements can really use as tools for culture change alongside the work of a policy change that they work for. So we we made this film with a lot of apprehension about how it would be perceived in the world, but we also worked deeply with the people with disabled led organizations and disabled activists who have been working on this issue for many many years. And so we're making it from the community and for the community as well as for a larger mainstream non-disabled audience. And it really pushed me to think about how we make a film that serves all of those types of audiences in different ways and offers different access points for them, whether they're already sort of in line with the point of view of the film or thinking about it for the very first time.
What do you hope viewers are left thinking about or talking about after they watch this project?
I think on a fundamental level, I hope particularly non-disabled viewers walk away with a reframed understanding of what disability is. Disability is a natural part of the human experience, and therefore society should be built to accommodate and support it fully. And so I think that's the very first step is shifting that understanding. And then secondarily, I hope that people really rally around and support the local and national movement organizations working around disability rights and justice because it's more important than ever right now.